Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Asher Kemp Jr., and I have the pleasure of being the executive director of this wonderful organization called the Coalition of Culturally Competent Providers, which was established by mental health and human service organizations that came together to provide leadership and guidance to ensure the application of cultural competency best practices for policy, programs, services, for communities of color. So I want to thank you all for coming again to our second HR webinar geared on retention and recruitment of staff in the mental health and human services. And this one is entitled, we call the Pipeline to Employment. And so I'd like to thank our guests for joining us as well for this panel discussion, and also thank some of our people and staff that have put this together, Renee Dorsey and John Federico. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the chair of the Coalition of Culturally Competent Providers, LaJewel Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Kemp, for the introduction. That you can actually put that screen back up because I want to acknowledge all of our members. There we go. And I definitely cannot do it by memory. So thank you for this. So I'd like to acknowledge our board of directors. So we have Wes, Malcolm for Radecke, Reginald, Dr. Banks, excuse me, for Dunbar, Ms. Renata Cobb Fletcher for Northern Children's Services, Mr. James Marshall from Safe Metals, John White from Consortium, also represented by Patricia Booker, and Mr. Joe Watkins from Community Council, represented by Vince Gordon. Our members of the Coalition of Culturally Competent Providers include A.L. Colley and Associates, Agent and Diversity Home Health Care Centers, ACANA, Community Council, the Consortium, CORA Services, Beyond Limits Mental Health and Wellness, Dunbar Community Counseling Services, Radecke, Northern Children's Services, One Day at a Time, Judith Alton, MD, Jen Powell Folks, Safe Metals Healthcare, Serenity Safe Haven Outpatient Clinic, James Watley, PhD, Donetta Watson, and West Health Systems. So welcome and thank you to all our members for the great work that they do in the community to keep us going. As Asher Kemp said, this is our second in our installment of, we have a 3-part series all dedicated to HR and staffing because everyone is having such a huge go at it during this time that we certainly want to make sure we provide a lot of attention to it and give as much support as possible. And so our focus this time will be more on how do we help support the pipeline of staff into our mental health field. And so I want to get started by introducing our panelists for this afternoon. So I want to start with Jay Grant. Jay Grant is the Associate Director of Field Education for the School of Social Policy and Practice at University of Penn. Jay Grant's pronouns are he and him. Jay received his bachelor's and master's degree in social work from Temple University. He has over 2 decades of social work experience and practice primarily in macro settings, working as part of multidisciplinary teams in direct practice, administration, policy planning, community organizing, and advocacy. Through the depth and breadth of his professional experience, Jay experienced expertise in macro level social work, agency-based practice, and field education, collaboration, and supervision. His areas of professional interest include HIV/AIDS education, prevention and care, empowering LGBTQ communities, homelessness, housing insecurity, and working with people experiencing diverse developmental and intellectual disabilities. Welcome. Thanks for joining our panel, Jay Grant. Our next up is Ms. Pamela McClenton, who is the Senior Director of Clinical Quality for the Management of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at DVH-IDS, Division of Planning and Innovation. Pam's social work career spans over 39 years. She has extensive experience in child welfare and behavioral health, Pam is a licensed clinical social worker in Pennsylvania and has been practicing as a mental health clinician for 24 years. She began her career with the City of Philadelphia at DBH IDS in 2004 and has served in numerous leadership capacities, including project manager for the Mayor's Task Force to combat the opioid epidemic in 2017 and the Mayor's Curfew Center initiative from 2005 to 2007. She developed and managed the DBH IDS opioid overdose prevention and Narcan rescue training and successfully implemented the department's emergency protocol response to the opioid epidemic. As Senior Director of the Clinical Quality Management for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Pam leads the department's internal and external DEI strategies and agendas. Through collaboration with internal and external stakeholders, the DEI team works to create DEI-infused workplace culture where everyone can thrive and be authentic and included, have a voice and feel valued, and achieve health, well-being, and self-determination. Pam is the recipient of the Commissioner's Award, Triumph Missionary Women of Honor Award, Outstanding Leadership Award, and ACE Leadership Award. Pam is proud, thriving, dyslexic, neurodivergent, who advocates relentlessly for people with invisible challenges. Thanks for joining us, Pam. Welcome. Next up, we have Dr. Sagen, who is the Chief Operating Officer for National Association of Social Workers, Pennsylvania chapter. Dr. Sagen has been working to propel the social work profession forward as part of the National Association of Social Workers. For the past 15 years, Dr. Sagen has been responsible for event planning, intern programs, interacting and educating students. Her passion lies in working with students and older adults, especially ones with dementia diagnosis. Dr. Sagen has started a coaching business to help people reach personal and professional goals through Say Again, LLC. She is a proud graduate of Penn State, the University of Southern California, and Kutztown-Millersville programs. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Now we have Ms. Lisa Radecke. Lisa Radecke has been a Director of Human Resources at CORA Services since November 2016. Prior to joining CORA, she held various HR positions in several different industries, including elder care services, construction management, and intermodal transportation. She has a broad range of experience in all areas of human resources, but finds that she does her best work in mission-driven, nonprofit environment. Lisa is an SHRM certified professional and a certified professional in human resources. She received her MA in Human Resource Management from Temple University, TU, I have to make the obligatory noise, and a BA in English from Cabrini University. Welcome, Lisa. Okay, I'm going to ask my panelists. I guess you guys can stay on mute until you're ready to speak. And when I pitch out questions, I'm pitching it out to you all. And so we are now over 2 years from the start date of our pandemic, over 2 years past the point of, shock to our systems, to our HR systems, when we had people going out and it was hard for employment. I would like to start out by saying, do you guys feel a change in what we have gone through? Are we headed upwards in that HR space as far as getting and retaining staff? And what are your thoughts about that? Do we have hope? Lisa, you're shaking your head. You're on mute.
I was trying to find the button. I'll never say that we don't have hope. I mean, I have hope every day, but it is definitely challenging in that I feel like I think of it as we're all fishing in the same lake for the same type of fish, and someone forgot to put the fish in the lake. It's just like coming, we're all going after that same type of candidate. And unfortunately, it's becoming this battle of money. It's becoming a money game. And so I think we've seen an uptick in challenges to retention, just people hopping with valid reasons to hop for more in the way of compensation. And, inflation's going up, so that's affecting people, their need for what kind of a paycheck they can bring home. So it's been really challenging.
And I would just add to what Lisa just said in terms of the challenge. I think one of the struggles that, we're bearing witness to is just the fact that such a large percentage of psychiatrists in this field are over the age of 55. And, it's really creating, a retirement drain on the behavioral health system, because we're not seeing as many young people entering into this arena. And I think Lisa hit it on the nose, because the compensation for behavioral health is not comparable to other medical professionals. So, you either have to make the decision to come into this field like so many of us did, recognizing that we would be underpaid and often undervalued for the work that we do. And I'm not sure that new employees are carrying that same mantra, that we did when we entered this arena. So I think that's definitely a major challenge that we're facing.
I'd just like to add, as with both what they said, is also the mental health challenges of the professionals. I work a lot with students, and we're seeing a lot more mental health issues, whether it's related to COVID and the last 2 years of being online. So just understanding some of it's compensation, but some of it from students that I'm talking to is, does the agency understand that I need time? So how is that built in? How is that kind of honored? In schools, we teach students self-care, self-care, self-care. But sometimes when we get into the field, it's, we have work to do. We have work to do. We have clients to see. So it's kind of helping them also, the job seeker, to see how that's being played out in an agency. So I agree with compensation, but I also agree with, does this fit my need mental health wise? Like if I'm really not feeling it, or something's happening, or if I'm breaking down, I can't be with clients. I can't do my job effectively, because in this field, unlike many other fields, we are the tool. The students are the tool, and they have to be, for competent professional work, they need to be well to do it.
I think the only other thing I'll add is, I think this pandemic and people leaving places really makes agencies kind of reflect on what type of succession plans are in place, not just for higher ups and leadership, but even for frontline staff. Is information and processes leaving with people, or is that embedded into the work in some way? And so it really makes us rethink how we're passing along information, sharing information, and putting a process in place to keep information flowing.
Thanks for adding that. I would like for you guys to elaborate. While I was reading the bios, I noticed in Lisa's statement, she said she desires to be in a mission-driven nonprofit space. And I think all of us have done it, because as you stated, Pam, this isn't like the high pay and workplace. How do we make sure that we emphasize that for people even considering this field? In what ways can we show that our work is the mission human work, and use that to attract new people? Or you guys can also elaborate on what that looked like for you coming into this field. How was this field attractive to you at the time, and how can we replicate that?
I think to speak from the mission-driven nonprofit side of it, I think I always think of it as it's the extra something, right? What is the extra something that you can get at CORA that you can't get at another similarly situated organization, right? And CORA really prides itself on their supervision model, so that you're not out there alone, right? You have a support team that can help you, you can connect with. Even though you're out in the field doing the work, there's a home base to come back to, and there's a home person that you can connect to, and you meet in supervision, and a very supportive environment that was really grown through these 50 years of not just people in your department, but people in the organization in general, because you all share that common something in our mission connects to you personally, and you share that, and you want to build and grow it, and then you all have that in common. So I like to talk about that when we're talking to people who are considering coming to CORA, and really shine on those things that really make us stand out as compared to other agencies.
Great point.
I'll jump in real quick. One of the things I know that I work a lot with my interns is they have to do a marketing job. So it's how do we help the public understand what we do so we can feel value and we can show value, but it's also helping high schools and guidance counselors, because if we're really talking about the pipeline, it starts early. TV has a lot of things that show negative stereotypes and negative stigmas for behavioral health. So it's one of those things of, if we can work with schools, high schools, I mean, even going into junior highs to say, here are some options, having that presence and having it in a positive light. Many of these kids, many kids have dealt with behavioral health therapists and professionals, and it's how do we show that as a strength? As with Pamela, my daughter is dyslexic, and guess what? We are embracing it and we're working with it. And it's one of those things of how do you do that, but how do you show it in a positive? Because so many times in the media or on TV shows, and I love Law and Order, but it just kind of seems like we're always the bad people. But so it's how do you change that? How do you change the societal view? And I think it's a huge macro, and it's not going to happen overnight. But I think if we each do little by little of, change one person, that I think might help us. And I think it might help in the future. It's not going to help our immediate need right now. And I fully understand that. But I think we just need to kind of change the conversation as to what we do and who we are.
And just piggybacking on Dr. Sagen, like when she's speaking about getting the youth at a very early age, like we're expanding our internship program to make sure that we connect with younger children, high school students at least, and we're really looking to provide them more with mentorship and some understanding of the behavioral health arena and all that you can do within the behavioral health field. I think it's important to reach children when they're younger. I knew I wanted to be a social worker from direct and indirect life experiences when I was very young. I was about 6 years old. I was watching a television show and a social worker came into the house to service the small children in the home. And I said, that's what I want to do. And I knew it, and I'm blessed because I was able to go through my my education knowing exactly what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. So reaching the youth young is important. I think that, one of the struggles that, well, I wouldn't say a struggle. I really, coming from a DEI lens, I see this as a great opportunity to diversify the behavioral health arena. Philadelphia is one of the nation's most diverse cities, culturally diverse cities, and we have a large immigrant refugee communities that don't access our services for multiple reasons: cultural barriers, linguistic barriers, just not enough cultural humility when they try to access our services. So this is a great opportunity, and we're taking advantage of it. We're doing diversity recruitment, definitely to our HBCUs, Lincoln and Cheney, who are nearby. Lincoln is my alumni, so I'm very connected to them still. We're also doing recruitment to our diverse communities, our grassroots organizations where people access frequently to know job positions that we have posted. And we're being intentional about what we're looking for and who we're looking for, so that there's no confusion that you're not the targeted audience that we're seeking. So if we're seeking a first or second generation immigrant with migration trauma, then we let it be known in how we describe the position and what we're needing. So that's one way that we're trying to tackle it.
Thank you for sharing those strategies with me. Jay Grant, I see you. I just want to say I talk a lot and I will keep asking questions. So everyone watching, feel free to shoot your questions into the chat because that'll make me shut up and read what you guys have to say. So go ahead, Jay Grant.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the sentiment about mentoring and role modeling. I do think like that's important. I'm also big on like storytelling. So I think sometimes we're forgetting in these recruitment opportunities to have people really share their stories, like how they got to where they got to. So a person can really see that they too were sitting where the people are that are receiving the information. And these are the choices and or narrow path I went through to get there. In addition, I think it's important for agencies, organizations to really like bring their missions to life as well, right? I think sometimes we say the mission, but we don't talk about how individuals have attached to the mission or how that plays out in an individual's journey in that particular place. And so for me, it's about mapping out who is the ideal client that the place is serving, like who's receiving services, and what does that look like from the front door to hopefully the end of services, which we really wish that was like, you know, the end for everybody, ending services, no longer necessary, you know. But then it's also like, what does it look like for a new person being hired, right? Like, who do you want to come through that door? What experience do you want that person to have, again, from the first job or task that they have to wherever they move within the agency?
And I think that's a good way to segue into my next question around, you know, the onboarding process that we've been going through, and what strategies can you guys share with us? So a lot of people are experiencing bringing staff on, and then within a month, you know, they disappear. So we don't know if they find new jobs or better employment, or they didn't like it for whatever reason. So what advice can you give for maintaining staff?
I'll jump in. I would think one strategy may be to give potential or new hirees a more realistic sense of the work that they will be doing in environments that they'll actually be doing the work in. And we can get there through a number of different ways. One way could be allowing new hirees or applicants to meet with current employees and have conversation with current employees to begin some sort of like mentorship strategy to help new hirees find their way and navigate. Definitely the utilization of interns. Internships, that's going to be our way of really building this network, in my opinion, and really having robust internship programs that provide like a real work experience. I like to focus on project-based internships where you are part of a team and you're adding value and you're being recognized for what you're providing to the work and moving it forward. I think there's a number of different strategies, but I think onboarding really needs to be individualized. I think that we've gotten in the habit of a very cookie cutter onboard process, and one size doesn't fit all. And I think Dr. Sagen alluded to that in terms of new hirees are really looking to maintain and sustain their well-being. And I think, and I can only speak for myself, so I'll speak as an I, that necessarily wasn't my understanding when I started the field. I think I may have been very idealistic and really wasn't as focused on my own well-being in doing the work, and the amount of vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue that I would withstand over years of doing the work. And I mean, it's real. It's real, and we all will hit a wall if we're not very careful and mindful of our own mental well-being while we're doing this work, because our mental stability is fragile, and we're going to be exposed to things that we would hope other people will never have to be exposed to in their lifetime doing this work. So I think being able to onboard people, individualize, customize it, look at the skill set that they bring and try to maximize on that, and then provide a career pathway for people. Like, I'm not going to stay if I don't think there's opportunity for me to advance. So if it looks like I'm going to hit a glass ceiling, then there's not a lot of motivation, and it's very competitive. So the next person that says there's opportunity for a career pathway with our organization, people are going to go over there. Yeah.
Sure, and word of mouth certainly has a great effect, right? So how do we create healthier work environments so that we can have our current staff speaking well of the place in which they work? Does anyone want to elaborate on what tools or what strategies you guys are currently using to create healthier work environments? Well, I don't want to stump you while you guys are thinking.
I don't want to monopolize, but one of the strategies that we're definitely utilizing to create a more DEI work culture is listening. Like we really do want to hear what our employees have to say, and we're willing to accept the good, the bad, and the indifferent in order to advance change that is sustainable and impactful. The struggle is not easy because employees have not been welcomed to really voice their opinion in a safe space. So people aren't really feeling as comfortable that there won't be retaliation and showing up in opportunities of career advancement. When it's time for me to be promoted, is that going to be blocked because I may have spoke up or voiced a contrary opinion? But we're working hard. Our leadership is in support of what we're doing and encouraging our staff, because change can't happen if we operate in a vacuum and leadership makes the decisions based on what they perceive or believe is impacting the staff. Staff have to speak up and be part of the change process. And it takes a little bit of courage to do that.
Thanks for sharing that. Before I go to my next question, I just wanted to ask a little deeper, what does listening look like? So does that mean you're putting out surveys and soliciting a response, or very intentionally creating space within your meetings? What does that mean that you are listening to your staff and giving them space to speak?
So we're doing various techniques. We're using surveys. We are creating employee listening gathering sessions where we just listen. And we're doing that based on the diversity of our employee groups, because different people have different unique needs, strengths, and challenges. So we're looking at what our African American Black employees have to say. We're looking at our Latinx. We're looking at our Asian Pacific Islanders. We're looking at our Caucasian and our white employees. We're really wanting to hear from everybody, because everybody's diversity matters and everybody is impacted. Nobody's going to walk away and not be impacted. So we really want to see the impact, and we want to see the overlay. We want to see where are the commonality, where are the themes that are showing up across these diverse groups, and then what are the outliners and the disparities that show up greater in various different diverse groups. But we're creating listening spaces. We've created the healing space, which was derived out of the murder of George Floyd, and was the very first opportunity for Black employees to not come to work after a horrific murder happened to a member of their community, and create and operate as business as always. We didn't feel before that we had a space that was safe, and we would congregate in one another's offices and whisper about our pain and our trauma, and being able to have a platform to safely and bravely articulate that is a employee wellness strategy, because we are the employees that engage the citizens of Philadelphia. But yet and still we are citizens of Philadelphia as well. So what impacts Philadelphians directly impacts us. So we have to be mindful that we take care and safeguard our own well-being and have an opportunity to process what we're feeling before we go out to service other people.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. My next question is more for Jay and Amy in your spaces with students. What are today's students looking for in an employer, and what do you find motivates them?
Sure. What are they looking for in an employer? They're looking for a place where they can feel that they can be themselves, but they can also contribute. They're looking for something that's worthwhile. And I think that's where when Jay was talking about the stories are so important because many people do come to this field and have stories. And that's why they come to the field, because they want to either change or give back to that part of it. So having the conversations, I mean, with my current students, and I have a few that are leaving me this week because of graduation, they're looking for a place that they can connect with, that they can feel a part of. So I love what Pamela was saying of just feeling a part of it, feeling connected. My students, when she was talking about the listening, I'm going to go back for just 1 second. I apologize. For the listening thing is giving them the space to talk, but also showing my vulnerability as a supervisor, knowing that I'm not perfect and I never claim to be perfect. I make decisions based on information that I have, and sometimes it's faulty information. So seeing that the students have, I don't want to say calmed down, but kind of taken a breath and been like, I don't have to be perfect when I go out into the field. Some of my students are feeling that perfectionism is a must and fear that they will disappoint employers. Well, what happens when my first person doesn't do what I asked them to do? And it's like, so trying to help them be realistic, but also kind of figure out what their path is. And I love the individual approach. That's how I work, is each student's different. Each student has a journey, a history. Each student has a goal in life. So kind of looking at what some of those are. Asking them during an interview process of, what would you like to do? This is what the job description says, but what are you looking to do? Because that might help us as well. Instead of them jumping to another agency, of jumping just to another department, and they already know the process, they already know the work, but it's just a little bit different. Because some of my students are just kind of putting applications out. I have one student right now who has five interviews in the next 2 days. That does not help employers, and I totally understand that. But from her point, she's so nervous and anxious that it's like, what do I do? So I guess it's really looking at each student individually and giving them a place where they can grow. They do want to know that there is a ladder in the agency of, okay, I can start here. Oh, then I can maybe move here. So having that possibility is really encouraging to them. But to summarize in really short sentences, they want somewhere they feel like they can belong and make a difference. So however we can convey that to them, that, okay, your skill set, your experience is yours, and it will be honored through our agency in working with this population. I think to them is where it's at. They do want money. I won't lie. I had one of my interns say, I want money. And my question to her was, she wants to go into clinical social work and she will need clinical supervised hours, is, did you ask if you have opportunity for a clinical supervision in your agency? Because that could in and of itself cost a few $1,000s a year, whereas you're taking it just based on it was a $1,000 difference in pay. So trying to help the students again understand that the agency is taking time to interview you and to onboard you and to orient you and to train you, that we need to be a little bit more respectful of not just jumping at the first thing. So trying to make sure that where and what they want to do matches with the agency. Is it going to be foolproof? No. But that's where, as an intern person, that's what I try to help them understand, is that it's a journey together.
I
Thanks
totally
for
agree.
that. Oh gosh,
Oh, sorry.
they're doing construction on my office now that I'm over here. I was just going to say thank you for that, Dr. Sagen. I think for a long time, employers were the ones that were shopping, and we need to realize that they're shopping too. And so we need to make sure that this is a match on both sides.
Yes, I think I was going to say that I think students are looking for ongoing professional development, similar to what Dr. Sagen said, they know they've had a certain amount of time to kind of train and learn something. They're anxious to get out there and really show what they've learned. And they're excited to do that as well. But they also kind of know some of their like areas for growth, right? And so I do think a way to continue to capture people and retain people is to talk about what professional development looks like. I think sometime, especially in a time where a place is really like in a rush to hire people, they're not talking a lot about supervision. And so for a student, they've been in this process for 2 years, depending on their program, maybe a little bit longer, where they've had some pretty consistent and strong supervision, right? And I'm usually really clear with students that during a time as a student, you have access to supervision and that process in a way that you don't always have in a real life setting, so to speak, or in a employment setting. And so the hope is that you can go to these interviews and you can ask questions about supervision, and also similarly be able to talk about what you would need or want in supervision. What is that process, right? And so then also for places to kind of think about, who are we trying to hire? What background do they have? And does the agency provide a certain lens of supervision? Is it a social work lens? Is it some other lens? Like, what is it? But if you're hiring a social worker to do social work, it could really help to talk about the supervision lens in social work, to incorporate how that's going to continue to be the guide for what the student is learning and things like that. So I think sometimes like that's a missed opportunity.
And I know that question wasn't for me, Ms. Harrison, but I just wanted to say, I really appreciated everything you all have said. We're working to reimagine our internship program, and God, I would love you to be part of our work group and help us along the way. I do lend my service to universities, Temple, Chestnut Hill, and several other universities, just to tell my lived experience story that drew me to the social work field, to encourage young students to consider the behavioral health and social work arena as a career path. I don't know how successful I've been thus far, but I know that they like the story. And vulnerability is key. Once you allow yourself to be vulnerable, it takes a lot off of your plate, because there is no such thing as perfection. And we're all going to get told off and cussed out by the people that we service. I know as a young social worker coming into the field, the question that everybody said to me when I'm working was, do you have any kids? When I'm working with them about their children. And at the time, no, I did not have any children. But, it didn't deter me from still being and practicing humane and compassionate and non-judgmental services to the individuals that I served. So, yeah, we got a lot of work to do, because this reminds me, I'm the end of the boomer. I'm the last year for the baby boomers, but I know my parents are boomers. And when I think about how society and the world changed to accommodate the boomers, what we're witnessing right now is a shift in our society to accommodate the new influx, the new generation of workers and families. And, I see it happening everywhere. And the really incredible thing that's going to have to happen is that we're not going to do business as usual. The way we have done this for, the years that covered the boomers who are now retiring and leaving the arena, it's someone else's time, and it's going to shift to accommodate their individual and particular needs.
And to kind of piggyback on that shift, what should employers start expecting of this new generation of staff? So should they expect to, bring someone on and expect 5 years out of them? Or will it be successful if you get 1 year out of them? Like, I know you guys are speaking about areas for growth that people want to come in, but they may not want to just grow in one agency. They may want to grow in the field specifically. So what should employers expect as far as timeline and maintaining staff? What would be, successful retention? And then also to add on to that, not only successful retention, so then like Jay was mentioning in the beginning, the pipeline, not just for managers, but creating that ongoing recession plan for direct care staff because of that timeline. But go ahead, Pam, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I just wanted to throw a caveat out. I work for the city of Philadelphia, and a lot of people would say, oh, you got that good city job. And that meant that you were going to get your job, stay, get that good old pension, and retire. What I'm seeing with new young employees that come into the city is they don't see it the same way. So they are staying for enough time to gain the skill set that they need and to, you know, have opportunity to build a reputation around a project or two, and then transitioning. And not always in the city of Philadelphia. People are transitioning to other cities, other states where opportunity is availing themselves for them to be positioned in a higher level position. So that's what I'm witnessing. So that good city job mantra, that's old school. That I might be the last of the Mohegans with that kind of concept. I don't know if that was a derogatory term. I'm sorry. I forget. Please apologize for that.
Anybody else want to elaborate on what we should expect out of the timeline of employment for the new group coming into the workforce, Jay?
Yeah, I do think times have changed. I totally will echo what Pamela just said. I think it is okay to think for a shorter time span, right? But to keep in mind, you know, I keep saying like the pandemic just makes you rethink that whole idea of two things can be true, right? And so in some ways, I have been so happy and excited for people who have taken advantage of opportunity to do the thing that things didn't slow down enough for them to do it, right? So I've never been so happy for them, right? But then at the same time, I'm so like heartbroken in terms of like who's leaving the city, right? Who's leaving these agencies, who's leaving these places. And so I do think it's okay to think about like, yeah, a shorter time frame for people staying, right? And if there's a way for agencies to like collaborate better, to kind of know that, you know, we can pass people, I hate to say along or through, almost like some kind of continuum. Like I think if people started to think like that, right, like then we would all be helping each other. You know, a school, shout out to schools providing students, interns, and then students who would then become employees, right? And then you kind of continue this thing like, this is what we do. They do more of that over here, right? You know, we collaborate, we partner, like that type of thing, I think could be helpful. I worked in spaces before where people would sometimes have like satellite sites at other agencies that do similar work or need to zero in on a certain population. And the risk there was, if I send an employee somewhere else to do satellite work, it's helping and it's a great thing for my organization. But now the satellite place gets to peep at my employee, see how good they are, right? As well as the employee gets to say, hey, these people over here are nice. Sometimes nicer, okay? You know what I mean? And people make the jump in that particular way. So in my mind, like we know all these things are happening. We shouldn't be, and I know sometimes because of money, funding, and those types of things, we're kind of competing even though we don't mean to be, right? But we do know now that, you know, a 2 to 3 year time frame is probably good to think about, because at this point in time, opportunities are coming from all over that people are like kind of seeing and thinking about. And just like I want, you know, us to tell our stories and encourage people to stay or come, people are telling their stories to get people to come where they are, you know, and so you kind of like trying to play like catch up with that whole like process.
I want to talk about, you know, everyone wants to be creative. All employers want to respond to the needs of what your candidates are asking for, but how flexible can we be within the constraints of our funders? So if you guys have been successful in creating new strategies, please share that. And if there are ways that you want to think about how we can push back and advocate on the behalf of our staff and potential candidates, what does that look like?
I can tell you some of the some of what we're seeing and experiencing from we do 30-minute employee confidential listening sessions. And one of the things that is we're hearing is a level of resentment from older employees who have worked for a long time and money wasn't good. And they may have just gotten to a point where they're making a good amount of money, and new hirees, young students come in making comparable salaries. So on one hand, we're trying to attract new talent, but at the same time, we have to be aware and cognizant of the staff who have been with us and have been committed and have been putting in the work and the labor for years. And how do we compensate them? How do we reevaluate their salaries to make them competitive with the salaries that we're trying to start new hires on? I don't know. I think that we're in a really tricky situation as organizations, trying to attract talent, and trying to provide compensation that's comparable to some other industries. Our industry is not an industry that pays well. It's a heart work jobs that we do. So you're driven by your heart and your passion, more than you are your desire to really get rich. And that's how I think I've always understood this field. I wasn't always happy about that, but I understood that there wasn't as much money compared to my friends that went into corporate America and were making a lot more money than me. But I loved what I did. So I don't know. I don't think that the city of Philadelphia is going to be able to bankroll but so many positions. But one of the strategies that they're looking at is removing the degree requirements. So that's one strategy that they're looking at to compensate for not maybe having the money, but allowing people to enter with a lesser degree, no degree, lived experience, and so forth.
Great. Anyone else want to add?
I know that the degree piece is a challenge for us as well. A lot of our funders require that for certain roles. And we have gotten creative in trying to create opportunities for people who may have a lesser degree, but are working toward that and can start kind of being in a position that gets them some exposure to that work so that when they're really ready per the funder requirements, they can move into something like that. We also started, we just new to the behavioral health world with IBHS services, and we have to hire a lot of BHTs, so behavioral health techs. And we were finding that we were running up against that degree or that training requirement. So we actually created a training program within our center that actually brings people in without experience, puts them through this training and gets them really prepared so that they have a really good understanding of what the role requires, and hopefully, taps into that sense of this is something I want to pursue further down the road. And then we can get them into a position and then hopefully build them as they move forward in their career.
That's a really great strategy. Thanks for sharing. I want to read a question we have. This is from Lolita Devane. Hi, Lolita. She always attends our events. And she's from Devane Insurance Agency. So here's what she wrote. Just wanted to ask, provide an employee workplace benefits supplemented by the company, example, life insurance policy paid by the agency, will be a part of the package to attract and retain employees due to the rising cost of benefits. All employees are impacted by lack of medical coverage due to the expense, and therefore offering an array of benefits would also attract. This is a value added benefit to new hires. Do you guys find that the benefits package is significant? And the question is to everyone, but certainly Jay and Dr. Sagen, are the students speaking about benefits at all?
Oh, I was just going to say quickly, I think yes and no. I think sometimes it's about the student. And I think sometimes, and we said this kind of before, based on like the experience. And so it's like a student who has had work experience in addition to going to school, they've worked somewhere else. And so they know to think about that. They also know that the benefits package does reflect like the overall offer to some degree. But then we have students who are, just kind of new, young to life in general. And so they just haven't really begun to think that way, and so they are more excited about the potential of experience they can get and the learning that can still happen. They're still like in that mood. Like they haven't yet thought about like, oh yeah, they probably don't realize, that soon they'll be off their parents' like benefits, right? And so they needed to be thinking about that like now. And so sometimes they are, but not often. But I do think perks are important for people to kind of see what that means. And then lastly, I think it's okay for employers to kind of think about the candidate who doesn't have all the experience that you were looking for, but somehow in the interview, you see their potential. And so then in that hiring process or onboarding process, you talk about how you're going to invest in them to be an even better like employee and candidate. And again, it's like a soft promise that somebody would say like, okay, I'll stay so I can receive that support and that guidance. But I think it's worth a try.
And I agree with what he said. What I see is a lot of older returning to school students as well. So they already have families. They understand the benefit structure. They understand, hey, I need medical or I need X, Y, and Z. Whereas I don't know, some of the agencies that I've talked to don't really express what the benefits are when they're talking to someone at the hiring level. They're like, well, here's your salary and here's this. But Jay's right, a lot of students don't understand what that really means. And so if you can just show the value added of, okay, well, we're going to give you these benefits, and that's another $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a year, that kind of, being that blunt kind of helps them understand, oh, wait a minute, this is another added part of it. The other thing I'd like to add is with benefits, some of the students are looking for flexibility. They're looking for, if I have a child that has to get to school by 7 a.m., but I don't have to do pickup, can I do a little bit more flex time? Some agencies can accommodate that and some can't. It just really depends on workload and what is going on. But I know I have students who are looking for that, or they're starting to take care of an aging parent or a grandparent. So it's what other responsibilities do they have? And if there is a little bit of flexibility, that might also mean the world to them of, okay, now I don't feel as much pressure. It kind of takes a weight off of our shoulder, and then they're willing to do it. The last thing is, I love what Jay said about just seeing promise in a person, just seeing potential. When we do interviews, the director always interviews first to see if they have the competency level for what they're asking. And then the staff or a handful of staff comes in and does the culture and the climate interviews of, does this person, one, we're a small agency, so do they fit with us? Like, will they kind of understand that if there's a project, it's all hands on deck. It's not, that's not my job. I'm just going to sit in my office. So what is that? Sometimes we look at, we can teach skills, we can teach abilities, we can teach knowledge if you're looking social work with the knowledge, skills, and abilities. But we can't teach personality, and we can't teach character, and we can't teach how they interact, the interpersonal interaction. Sometimes to us, that is much more important. I love interviewing interns, and I say, why do you want to come to Macro? I ask them, why do you want to come to us? For what reason? And I honestly love the ones that say, I don't know anything about it, but I'm willing to learn. Because to me, that learning spirit and that just desire means so much more than someone's like, yeah, I already know all about it. I'm perfect. And it's like, okay, well, let's have a conversation, but okay. So just being, I guess it goes back to individualizing just a little bit of, who is that person? How do I talk to them? When we work with leaders and stuff, and we work with legislators, we have to understand their background. So we know how to talk to them. Are we telling them a heartfelt story? Are we telling them statistics? Are we telling them hard data? So it's really just how you connect with the person. Sorry, that was.
I really appreciate you all's perspective on that, because what we have, as Pam was mentioning, is this generation of like the boomers and Xers are in the positions of management and decision making. And so, you know, we show up and we want to present the fancy benefits package, and it's a great benefit, but they're so young. And Jay said, they're not only new to the job, they're new to the world, right? Like everyone's just getting here and figuring things out that they don't even know to appreciate that in the same way that we're offering it. So I'm glad that, you know, Dr. Sagen, you're there to kind of advise, like, wait a minute, this is actually a great package. So this is worth this amount of money. But for many times, you know, the candidates don't have that sort of support and advice and aren't valuing what we are placing a lot of value on. So it's great to have that perspective. I want to read another comment in our chat from Camille. It would be helpful that positions offer sign-on bonuses. Some nurse roles I have seen 10K or more, or some incentive to pay for student loans. So in what way, I know pre-pandemic, before the world fell apart, our margins were small. There was no room, you know, to kind of give promotions or increases or anything. And so now in this world where we are really in a staffing crisis, we're like, where can we get more money to actually appropriately pay people, and then bonus on top of that. So certainly that's a great strategy. You guys want to share any finance strategies you've had around money incentives, if you've been able to do it? If not, what other strategies have you put in place of that sort of financial compensation?
So we have done sign-on bonuses for some of our positions, especially our hard to fill positions at the direct service level. Yeah, I don't know if it's been successful or not. It helps. But we've been able to do that, as well as referral bonuses. So we've always had a referral bonus program. So we give people who are currently here, who bring people in, a little something for the referral. We have talked about in the past both continuing education programs and also the student loan piece, but we just haven't been able to figure out a way to get there to provide any kind of assistance with that. So still always trying to think and see how we can do it.
I'm not aware of any kind of sign-on bonuses the city of Philadelphia is offering. I think given its constraints as a governmental like entity, that may be a little bit difficult, and a lot of city jobs are unionized jobs. So city benefits are pretty good in terms of your health insurance benefits and your pension. So they come with a lot of perks. That may be the attraction for some people to join the city government entity. But I do like the concept that you mentioned, Lisa, of like referral, like giving people, like, I know when I buy a car, if I refer somebody to my dealer, I get, you know, something if they buy a car, and that's always nice. I think that all employees should be a little bit more intentional around the forgiveness program for student loans and use that as a marketing strategy to attract, because most people, if you are in our field, can have your degree forgiven, and a lot of times your employer is not the one driving that. You're going to HR to get them to complete the documents that need to be completed. If your employer used that as a sell-in mechanism to attract people, that you know, we're on top of that. You know, you come to us, you know, you work a certain amount of years, get student loan forgiveness. I know it's very, very popular in the education arena. If you work in an urban-based school system for a certain amount of time, your loans will be forgiven. And I think more lobbying on the behavioral health social work arena needs to be done to shorten the time frame. I think it's 10 years it requires you to work, but I think it should be much shorter, just to incentivize people to at least come in, and maybe we can hook them once they get in the door, you know.
Now, what about, so we've had the use of technology to do Zooms and work remotely. how can agencies utilize remote work to make their offers look more presentable, more desirable? How are you making your roles flexible with this? And Pam, is DBH doing remote? You guys are still allowed to do remote work?
Yes, DBH IDS is 1 day in the office right now, and the rest is remote. We're moving towards 2 days and the rest of the week remote. We've done some renovations in our main headquarters at 1101 to create drop down spaces. So when you do come in, I would love if we could use that. You know, the team that works with me, we love working remotely, and our productivity has been phenomenal over the last 2.5 years, more so than it would have been if we were in the office, because we just didn't have the same distractions. We didn't have the cooler, we didn't have the lunch break, and we didn't have all those famous stores on Market Street to pop in and shop. So our productivity was extremely good, and we as a team would love to continue on as a remote, full-time remote, not even having to come in once or twice a week.
What is a drop down? You said to come in and have a drop down center. What is that?
So, you know, myself and others included, we had offices, and very nice offices. And with the renovation, we did away with office space. So there is some office space. But for the most, if I'm coming into the office or anyone's coming into the office, you'll secure a location within the building before coming in, and that will be your drop down space while you're there. We're all laptop ready, so everybody within our department has a laptop. And surprisingly, like, we don't have a crystal ball, but we had moved to that just a few months prior to the pandemic. So once we were sent home, we were ready to operationalize very quickly. So yeah, so that's how like remote will work. Will drop down stations. Nobody will have an assigned office anymore. You'll just take up space when you're in the building.
That reminds me of this article I just read about how not only do people not want to return to the office, they don't want to return to the same office. And so if there was a way for people to create new space for people to operate in, and what does that look like? And how does it make people feel differently? I don't think we talk enough about the physical space that we're operating in and how that contributes to our wellness, our happiness while we're there at work. So certainly we need to add that to the list of things to do an assessment of what your workspace is and figure out ways that you can actually change it. Lisa, are you guys still doing a lot of remote work? Are you letting your staff be remote halfway? What are your strategies?
So we had wonderfully so had a lot of growth during the pandemic. So we, like my department, the HR department, has like doubled in size. So our office space is too small. So we are actually doing remote work, like 1 day, 2 day in the office. Our direct service staff have been out in the field since the summer of 2020. I think it was the first time we went back out. And we do a lot of school-based services. So a lot of them were already used to this, being out in the world and maybe coming home to home base, and we called it hoteling, dropping in a drop-down space to do some work, pick up some materials and go. So we're still very much in this hybrid, almost fully remote space, but trying to come back and redo those spaces so that there's more opportunities for people to drop down when they come in. More opportunities for people to gather to do collaborative work as opposed to hard walls and closed doors.
Can I just follow up on that? Not being in an office with lots of people, what I'm hearing from some students as well is they like the remote, but they also want the human connection. So they feel like they're missing that. So if there's a way that if you are 100% remote, that, once a month there's like a gathering or something, or the team meetings, because what they're saying is, I'm getting really good at computer stuff, but it's not the same. I'm starting to lose some things in whatever this is called, interaction. It's not the same as being in person. So I know for me, some of my students are really, really excited and anticipating having at least some, employee or supervisor connection that is not two-dimensional. So that's another thing that some of the students really, some don't. They're like, I'm okay on, computers the whole time. But there's others who come into the field for the human connection. We are here to help other humans. We are here to, respect dignity and everything else. So just realizing that some of your employees may want that. They might not be able to verbalize it to you because they're just kind of like, something's missing. So sometimes it's just that little human connection. It's not little, it's huge. It's the human connection aspect. That being on Zoom is great. It's accessible. It has this, but it's still two-dimensional. So how do we find that balance for people? That maybe once a month, just, is there a way that a few of us can get together so I can have that conversation or have the interaction or make sure that my interpersonal skills are strong and I haven't lost them?
That is such a great point. When we were, fully remote, I enjoyed the convenience of it. I enjoyed the convenience of having to do laundry less, right? Saving on gas dollars and being able to schedule differently. And it wasn't until, and I didn't know that I was missing something until my first in-person meeting, and I was like inappropriately hugging people and like, hey, and all in everyone's space. And I was like, wait a minute, I must have been, so like you said, people can't even, you don't know that you did enjoy that you do miss it, that your body misses it, and that there's a certain amount of interaction that really benefits us, really benefits our mental health. So I understand that. I want to get to someone text me a question, so it's not on the chat, but I'm gonna read this off. How do we retool our industry to meet the interests of today's workers? A, do we focus on creating more of a virtual work environment for workers? Or B, do we create resources for today's workers within our physical locations? For example, childcare support, fitness centers, dining, employee recreation centers, nap room, etc. So whatever people are enjoying outside of the space, should we bring that in, or should we encourage them to enjoy those things outside of their workspace? Has anyone found any success or failures in that area?
I'm just going to reiterate that this is really a shift in culture that we're really experiencing right before our eyes. And I think that business as normal or usual, the way we've done it for so many years, it won't look like this. And it just won't look the same because we're not dealing with the same mindset. This is a new generation. This is a technology generation. All of us, or I can only speak for me, I grew up when there were 8-tracks. Okay. So I grew up when, I still had a black and white TV. Okay. So a lot has changed technologically, and the young people that we are seeing come into the workplace now, into the workforce, they grew up with technology. So this is all they know. So the concept or the ideal that the way business looks today, the way our offices look, the where we work and the way we work is going to stay the same for the next 20 years. That I would be highly remiss to really believe that would be the same. Just in the young people I work with now, they think different than I do. And they introduced me to a concept called process. I need time to process that. And that was new to me because I didn't know anything about having time to process in the workplace. You were told to do something and you got it done. So, I'm learning, and I'm learning a lot of things that these young folks have a lot of great strengths, and I'm really admiring them because they are not settling for the status quo, which I think I was socialized to accept the status quo and keep it moving. And no, these folks don't care whose toes they hurt. they're not going to accept what they don't think is acceptable. So I think this shift is happening right before our eyes, and I would love to reconvene 5 years from now and with everybody here and just see what it looks like. At that point, I think it will look very different.
I was going to say, I think it's important, to like kind of stay connected to like the present, right? And so I think some places have quickly wanted to say, like, we got through the worst of the pandemic, and now we can get back to normal, right? But similar to what Pamela is saying, right? Like, whatever we thought was normal, right, isn't the new normal, right? Or isn't what we can do now, right? And so now we have this time and this space to not do everything, but we certainly can try some stuff, right? Like, at this point, places should try things. And so to your question, like, you don't have to bring all those things from the outside that people are accessing now. Like, they don't all have to come in. They don't all have to come in at the same time. But I think employees, new employees, present employees would appreciate just seeing places like try stuff, right? Try stuff that they never tried before. Coming up with something once a month, like you were saying before, that brings people together in some type of way, right? Because again, I'm back to like, what is it? As much as people have gotten comfortable doing their remote stuff, and that makes sense, we still can't lose sight of like, what type of culture are we trying to still create? So even in this virtual world, like, again, is it two-dimensional some days, not two-dimensional other days, right? And or even in a two-dimensional situation, like, what kind of environment or culture are we still trying to create, right? And so to students who feel like they've missed something, I'm trying to tell students, like, you're flexing a muscle that people before you didn't even get a chance to do. Like, they were thrown into this pandemic and they had never, like Pamela said, some of them wasn't so techie, you know what I mean? And all that kind of stuff. But since you had to learn to work during this, you're now flexing a muscle around engagement that other people didn't, right? So don't think about what you lost, think about what you gained, right? And how you can continue like to play that through. But I do think people should think about how you continue creating some kind of work environment or climate, even in the virtual spaces. I think it's just things that people should talk about and share, and kind of have like those virtual hangouts, which some people think is kind of corny, right? But I think, again, it's like Pamela said, you're no longer bumping into people at the water cooler, right? Where some of those bump-ins were like needed. You needed that interaction with your colleague. You appreciated either what compliment they gave you, even if it was just a head nod to say like, keep going, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. So as much as I appreciate being remote, in that moment where I could use somebody to kind of pick me up, there's actually nobody there. You know what I mean? Until I come on Zoom. So I think it's okay to think about that and kind of like build that into the process.
Great point, and great segue into our next question in the chat. Can anyone elaborate on employee engagement? What can organizations do to ensure current employees are engaged? Thank you, Dana. So certainly, like you said, we're in this two-dimensional world. We're spending most time via Zoom. Even for people that are direct care, they're in the field and separate. How are you guys keeping your employees engaged?
Well, I can speak to that for DBHIDS. I think we have quite a few engagement efforts. We have wellness strategies, a whole wellness team. We have DEI strategies. But we also did a survey, and it was determined that we're a workplace culture of meetings. So you can have 1,000,000,001 strategies for employment engagement, but if you don't carve out the needed and necessary time for employees to engage, then you're just going to have a lot of opportunities, but not a lot of participation. So, that's one thing I think employees' leadership needs to be mindful of, the type of culture. Like, are you having way too many meetings? And if you are, how do you condense those meetings? And how do you integrate some of the meeting topics that are very common with the same players in the room? So that's what we're working on now, just really trying to be more cognizant of the culture that we are and really begin to focus on the culture that we desire to be. And some employees just don't want the engagement, real talk. You know, we've done surveys to say, hey, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? Have you participated? And people say if they can carve out a moment to breathe, they don't want to be in an activity with other people. They just want to be able to breathe. And hearing that really helps me to understand that our staff may be too overworked, just too overworked, period. Yeah.
Following up on what Jay said before and what Pamela were saying is another way of engagement and trying to reach out could be just a simple email, could be some like little inspirational sayings or phrases, or having a teammate, you know, having check-ins. I know where I worked at one time before, we kind of had the mentors buddy system of you had like 4 or 5 people on a small little team, and once a month you kind of checked in with each other. Are you guys doing okay? So it's not a supervisor supervisee kind of control issue. It's more of peers, but you are checking in. 1, it helped with collegiality. 2, it helped kind of reduce potential times that you kind of want to just badmouth what you're doing or not happy with your position or your situation, but it gave you an outlet. So it goes back to what Pamela was saying about the listening aspect of it. And that could be done in many different ways. So if people don't want to engage on whole big groups, maybe you can make little small groups of, okay, you know, can you guys get together, you know, even through email, just help and encourage each other. Because I think my view is that's what we're losing during this, because yes, the water cooler was awesome because it was just that instant, did you see this? You know, and you got to share things. So I think creating some of those small things, and it doesn't have to be 100-person picnic or anything like that, but just kind of small ways of showing appreciation. And it can be by supervisors and managers of just sending, hey, I noticed this, thank you. Sometimes it's just that little acknowledgement that helps keep the fire ignited with our passion and saying, I do make a difference. And what I'm seeing with my interns is they just want to make a difference. They want to be a part of something. So it can be something as simple as just acknowledging or seeing good work with a client, or thank you for being on that committee. You know, your volunteer hours meant a lot. So there are different ways, and I think I just took us off topic of just ensuring that they feel like they're connected, but that it's, as everyone was saying, it's going to be a trial and error. So if we're willing to be vulnerable and say, oh my goodness, that just messed up and did not hit the target I wanted, let's reevaluate it. I think there's a huge opportunity in making that a positive and actually a selling point for agencies, because then if the employees are a little bit happier or at least feel connected, that will then be portrayed and shown into the community, whether it's at a committee meeting. How many of the staff go to represent the agencies at meetings, right? So those collaborations are really important. So just the small little things, and it doesn't cost money. It costs maybe about 5 minutes of time, but I think sometimes those mean something to other people to keep passions going.
Thanks for reminding us to recognize each other. And that's a part of, as Pam was mentioning earlier, even a listening strategy to show that, you know, I'm paying attention to you. And in our moments of crises, which we have certainly been operating in, feel like we're constantly just putting out fires and figuring out where's the squeakiest wheel to attend to. That's the main thing that's dropped immediately is giving out awards and recognition and pausing to pat our colleagues on the back. So thanks for reminding us of that in this moment. Any more questions, or do you guys have any more points of reflection for us?
I just wanted to comment on Dr. Sagen in terms of just that that whole water cooler concept, I find myself oftentimes in Zoom inboxing my colleagues and just acknowledging, oh, I love your hairstyle. Oh, you look so pretty today. Oh, the great haircut. I miss you. How's the fam? So that's like kind of like my water cooler like moment with them while we're in the middle of a meeting, maybe a little boring. So, it's just a good way just to touch bases and say, hey, I do miss jumping into your office and chatting with you. Those are the kind of things that you really do miss because that in-person interaction and engagement really helped you to collaborate on a lot of projects. You just say hi to somebody and say, what's going on? I'm like, I'm working on this. And then the next thing you know, you're brainstorming with them and you're moving work forward. So those are some of the aspects of being virtual and in isolation. And I was always the person who said, I never want to work from home. So I'm so amazed and surprised that I'm the person saying, I don't want to come back, So life changes too. And like you said earlier, Ms. Harrison, the virtual experience really was very accommodating. It has been very accommodating to my own personal life and the care that I provide for my mom. So, when you look at everything, I would have been on family medical leave probably right now to manage just life situations. And I've been afforded the opportunity, just the silver lining in the pandemic was that we all learned how to work from home. I learned how to use Zoom and Teams, which I didn't know how to use until we had to work from home. So there's a silver lining to everything.
My mute was acting crazy. I was just about to ask you guys to give me just a closeout statement, and you just went right into it. So you're giving us all the feels, and I'm going to accept that as your closeout statement, and I'm going to go around the room. Jay, you're up next.
Yeah, I just say let's embrace this new time and figure out things together. Listen to each other, collaborate with each other, plan with each other, and most importantly, let's dream a new reality for each other.
I like that. Thank you. Dr. Sagen.
I just say this is a time of trial and error. This is a time of being vulnerable, of, really trying something new. It can be scary. There's a lot of fear that can go into it, but there can also be great reward. Just like what Jay was saying, it's a time for new dreams, or it's a time for dreams just renewed, maybe. So it's not a new dream, but dreams renewed and revisioned. So I just want to say thank you to all the people that are on the call with the agencies of, taking the time, your time is valuable. So I just want to say kudos and thank you for, listening to us during this time. So best wishes and everything.
Thank you. Lisa?
So I want to thank you guys because I took 2 pages of notes about how to connect with people better who are coming out of school. I just think, I think it's really important to the past 2 years have been so challenging, and trying to stop looking at it as a challenge, but looking at it as, like you guys said, an opportunity for something different, an opportunity for something new, and really trying to embrace that and make bigger, broader connections to places that we haven't connected with before. So I appreciate all the information that you guys shared. This has been an awesome experience. So thank you very much for having me on. It was really great.
Thank you all. This was such a great discussion. As I said in the beginning, we want to provide as much support as possible to everyone in our field. We want our field to really shine, thrive. We want it to keep it going. We want to be able to make sure our community maintains these resources that we currently have. And so a huge part of that is making sure our agencies remain staffed. So thank you all for helping us in this effort. Again, this was the second part of our 3-part series. Our next part, and Asher will come up to talk about it a little more, but our next part of our 3-part series will have more to do with the legal side of the HR space. And what are the new rules around, pandemic and sickness and people going out and hiring and terms and all of these other things. So we want to be able to provide support in that area. So thanks again. Thanks, Asher. Thanks, Renee, for all of your work you guys do on the back end and keeping our webinars going. So Asher, you're up.
Thank you, LaJewel. I just want to say to our panelists, a number of people have asked if they are able to contact you. So whatever information that you're comfortable with, if you could leave in the chat, so the individuals can get in contact with you if they have additional things they just want to bounce off you. One of the things for me, as I listen to all of you guys talk, I thought about the innovation and the collaboration of all the things that you guys were saying. And, one of the things I've always said is that I've always believed that the future is not something that we step into, but it's something that we create together. So as I look at how we need to look at some of the ways we retool our industry and pull things together, I just want to thank you, because it was very refreshing to hear some of these things that you guys shared today. Also, we are coming to the close of our webinar. So we have our 3rd session scheduled for May the 25th, if you want to mark your calendars. Again, that is May the 25th. It will be the same time from 3:30 to 5:30. And it's titled Pandemic-Related HR Concerns Regarding to Medical Legal Policies as it relates to the pandemic. So we already have some great speakers already lined up for that. We have Dr. Angela Brown, who is a medical physician that will be joining us to talk about things as it related to the pandemic and things the organization should be looking for. We have Dexter Hamilton from Coslin and Connor here in Philadelphia, one of the leading law firms around human services and policies and procedures. Dexter will be joining us for that. And we are working to identify someone from the Philadelphia Health Department as also being a part of that. So if you can please join us for that or share the information. We will try to get the flyers out probably next week or so that people can share those as well. But again, I just want to thank everybody. And if you'd like to find more information about the Coalition of Culturally Competent Providers, we do have our contact information up. And if you want to find out information on how to join us as well. So again, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good
Good night.
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 Thank you. Good night.
Right.